Everything you think you know about Pompeii is wrong. They didn't die from lava. Not a single drop of lava reached the city. They didn't die from ash. They didn't even die from the explosion. They died because superheated gas clouds, 300 degrees Celsius, moving faster than a hurricane, boiled the blood inside their bodies in fractions of a second. Their brains turned to glass inside their skulls, and the only reason we know any of this, a 17-year-old boy was watching from across the bay. His name was Pliny, and this is what he saw. October 24th, 79 AD, a completely ordinary morning. At nearly 100 fast food counters across Pompeii, vendors ladled duck stew and baked cheese from terracotta pots. The smell of roasting meat drifted through the streets. Wine splashed into ceramic cups. On the walls, graffiti. Over 11,000 pieces found. The ancient equivalent of social media. A weaver named Successus was feuding with a man named Severus over a barmaid called Iris. Envious one, why do you get in the way? He scratched into the plaster. Submit to a handsomer man. Severus fired back. You love Iris, but she does not love you. Somewhere in a back room, a child, 5, maybe 6 years old, drew gladiators on the wall in charcoal. Little stick figures fighting animals, like kids today drawing superheroes. Election slogans covered every surface, red paint on white walls. All the late drinkers ask you to elect Marcus Serenius Vecchia. That was a joke. An ancient attack ad. 20,000 people. Fast food. Love rivalries. Political campaigns. Children drawing their heroes. No one knew this was the last morning. But here's the part that changes everything. 35 kilometers across the bay, in the naval town of Misenum, a 17-year-old boy was studying, reading Livy, taking notes. The ground had been shaking for days. Earthquakes were common here. A big one had hit just 17 years earlier. Then at 1 in the afternoon, his mother pointed at the sky. A cloud was rising from the mountain. Not smoke, not steam. A column of rock and gas shooting 30 kilometers into the stratosphere. Pliny described it like a pine tree, a very long trunk from which spread some branches. That description was so precise that today, 2,000 years later, the most violent type of volcanic eruption is called a Plinian eruption, named after his family. The teenager kept reading his book. A friend of his uncle scolded the family for their calm. The boy ignored him, but his uncle, the Admiral, was already moving. Pliny the Elder was 55 years old, Admiral of the Roman fleet, author of a 37-volume encyclopedia of the natural world, a man who slept almost never and had slaves read to him during meals. When he saw the cloud, his first instinct was scientific. He wanted to get closer, to observe. Then a message arrived from Rectina, a woman trapped at the foot of Vesuvius. No escape except by sea. She begged him to come. He didn't send a single boat. He launched warships, multiple galleys, a full-scale rescue mission sailing straight into an eruption that everyone else was fleeing. The helmsman urged him to turn back. Pumice stones were crashing onto the deck, hot ash blinding the crew. His answer: fortune favors the bold. Steer to where Pomponianus is. If you're still watching, subscribe, because what happens next to this man, and to 20,000 people back in Pompeii, is one of the most terrifying things you'll ever hear. At Stabiae, he found his friend Senator Pomponianus loading ships in a panic. The wind was blowing toward shore. They couldn't leave, so Pliny the Elder did something extraordinary. He bathed. He ate dinner. He went to bed, and he slept so loudly that the servants could hear his heavy breathing through the door, the Admiral falling asleep while a volcano erupted 8 kilometers away. Either the most courageous thing imaginable, or a man who knew exactly what was coming and chose peace. Back in Pompeii, the sky went dark at 5 in the afternoon. Not dusk, not clouds, total blackness, like being sealed inside a room with no windows. Pumice stones, some the size of a fist, rained down, 15 centimeters every hour, piling up on rooftops, cracking wooden beams, 2 meters, then 3. The sound. Imagine stones hitting clay tiles. Constantly. For 18 hours. Some people fled, tied pillows to their heads with cloth, and stumbled through streets, knee-deep in pumice. Some made it to the harbor. Many didn't. Most stayed. They believed it would stop. Earthquakes were common. They always passed. Their homes were strong. The walls were thick. By midnight, the pumice was 3 meters deep. Streets were impassable. Doors were buried. And the eruption column, 33 kilometers tall, began to collapse under its own weight. The killing phase was about to begin. 1 in the morning. The first pyroclastic surge hit Herculaneum. Herculaneum was closer, smaller. The people had run to the boat houses by the harbor, 300 of them, crammed into stone arches, clutching each other, waiting for ships that never came. The cloud hit at 100 kilometers per hour. Temperature, 220 degrees. Every single one of them died in the same second. Their bodies were found in the pugilistic pose. Arms raised, fists clenched. Not fighting. Their muscles contracted from the heat. One victim's brain was found vitrified, turned to glass, by the temperature inside their own skull. At dawn, back at Stabii, the courtyard had filled with pumice so high they had to wake the Admiral, or he'd be trapped inside. The group tied pillows to their heads and walked toward the beach. Pliny the Elder leaned on 2 slaves. The air was thick with sulfur, heavy, toxic. He stood up, and then he collapsed. His nephew wrote, "I imagine the dense fumes choked his breathing." The scholar admiral who sailed into a volcanic eruption to save strangers died face down on a beach, the sky burning above him. His body was found 2 days later, intact, uninjured. He looked more like a man asleep than dead. 7:30 in the morning. The 4th surge reached Pompeii, 300 degrees, moving faster than any car on a highway. Every living thing in the city died in fractions of a second. A mother shielding her child, a man eating breakfast, a dog chained to a post, twisting against its tether. A family of 4 who had barricaded their bedroom door with a bed frame. The surge went through the door anyway. 35 kilometers away, the teenage Pliny was running. The darkness reached Misenum. Buildings swayed. His mother, elderly, overweight, begged him to leave her behind. She would slow him down. He grabbed her hand and refused. Pliny wrote, "You could hear the shrieks of women, the wailing of infants and the shouting of men. Some were calling their parents, others their children or their wives, trying to recognize them by their voices. Many besought the aid of the gods, but still more imagined there were no gods left, that the universe was plunged into eternal darkness for evermore." And then, this line, a 17-year-old boy, standing in total blackness, believing he was about to die. I believed I was perishing with the world, and the world with me, which was a great consolation in my dying. A faint glow appeared. They didn't know if it was fire or daylight. The ash fell so heavily they had to stand and shake it off every few minutes, or be buried alive. Then the sun came back, blood red. Everything was covered in ash, like snow, Pliny wrote. Where Pompeii had been, silence. 20 meters of volcanic debris. A city of 20,000 people erased from the landscape. For 1,700 years, no one knew it was there until 1748. And then, in 1863, a man named Giuseppe Fiorelli noticed something. Strange hollows in the hardened ash, human-shaped voids where bodies had decomposed over the centuries. 1,700 years of silence, and the dead still held their shapes. Fiorelli poured liquid plaster into the hollows, and the dead spoke again. A mother curling around her child. A man covering his face. Couples embracing. The folds of their clothing. The expressions on their faces. A chained dog, twisting in agony. CT scans of the casts reveal something unexpected. Nearly perfect teeth. Almost no cavities. A diet low in sugar. These were healthy people. They had decades of life ahead of them. They had 18 hours to leave. Many chose to stay. And here's what keeps volcanologists awake at night. Vesuvius has erupted about 50 times since 79 AD. The longer the quiet period, the more explosive the next eruption. It's been 82 years since its last eruption in 1944. The longest pause since the one before 79 AD. 3 million people live in the danger zone today. 600,000 in the red zone. The area requiring immediate evacuation. The government plan assumes 7 days to evacuate. In 79 AD, people had 18 hours and many still didn't leave. Pliny the Younger waited 25 years before he wrote any of this down. The historian Tacitus asked him for an account. He wrote 2 letters. Those 2 letters are the only surviving eyewitness description of a major volcanic eruption from the ancient world. Without them, we would know almost nothing about what happened that day. A 17-year-old boy who kept reading Livy while the mountain exploded, who grabbed his mother's hand in the dark and refused to let go, who spent a quarter century carrying the memory of a sky that turned to night, and then sat down and wrote it all. On the walls of Pompeii, someone once scratched, "Vibius Rostucta slept here alone, and missed his darling Urbana." What would you carry for 25 years before you could write it down? What ordinary morning are you living right now? That you'll remember the rest of your life. Think about that. The people of Pompeii were eating breakfast, drawing on walls, arguing about elections, falling in love. They thought it was just another Tuesday. The eruption of Vesuvius buried a city. But what it really preserved was something far more fragile. The proof that people 2,000 years ago lived exactly the way we do, loved the same, worried the same, drew the same heroes on their walls. And that's the thing about Pliny's letters. He didn't just record a disaster. He recorded the last ordinary day. 82 years of silence. 3 million people at the foot of the mountain. And Vesuvius, patient, quiet, still waiting. But that silence? It has a story of its own. In 1944, American bombers flew through an eruption column over Naples. Ash covered their wings. Engines choked. The mountain reminded them. It never left. And neither did the people living in its shadow. 3 million of them. Still there, still hoping the next morning is just another ordinary